This is Stu at the beautiful Purple Valley, and I'm here with Maty Ezraty. I got it right this
You
time.
got it right.
Welcome. And I gather you've been practicing, what, 30 years plus?
Yeah, 30 years plus.
And did you start off first with Ashtanga, or did you start with a different form? How did you start?
I started with two teachers. One was an Iyengar teacher, and one was, at the time, there really wasn't the vinyasa flow, but she was an eclectic teacher who did some Ashtanga and did some Iyengar yoga. So they were my two main teachers for a little while. And then in 1986-ish, an Iyengar Institute opened up in Los Angeles, and I started attending Iyengar classes.
Right.
And my first teacher's training with the most, I was very blessed with Donna Holloman. So I considered her to be my teacher for a very long time.
And were you maintaining an Ashtanga practice at the same time, or you?
Well, at that time, I hadn't met Patabi Joyce yet.
Right.
So I had been practicing Iyengar and a little bit with the other teacher who did a little bit more vinyasa. And then Patabi Joyce came to where I was actually working, to the Center for Yoga. I actually hosted him in Los Angeles. And we had 80 students in the class. It was the first time he'd been to that center. I think maybe even the first time to LA, although I'm not sure about that. And I really liked the practice. And then I went and studied with him when he was in Encinitas for, I think he was there for 2 weeks, so I went down there for that.
Yeah.
And I took Ashtanga as my personal practice, but I continued to study the Iyengar system.
And what attracted to, because if you'd had they're quite different in their approaches, but also the movement. What attracted you to the Ashtanga? But because you still also hold on greatly as well to the Iyengar influences, I'm right in thinking.
Yeah, in my head, they're not separated.
Okay.
And they're not different. It's all yoga.
Yes.
And I kind of have a brain that works in a way that puts things in compartments, in closets.
Right.
And each one has its value. Maybe it's like a different season or something. So each one has a flavor. And I don't seem to find them in conflict with each other.
Right.
I understand their differences, and I understand why they're different. And then I just choose them when I need them.
Yeah.
So they don't have a conflict in my head. It just doesn't work like that for me.
Which is very nice, because there's sort of conflicts in some people's heads, isn't there? Do you find sort of stubbornness when it comes to some Ashtangis introducing some of the concepts maybe of what it is you're trying to get them to do?
Yes, I think sometimes it's when we're not used to something, we think that maybe we can't add.
Yeah.
And the truth is that yoga is so vast that there's really no one way. And there's no one way for one person in their whole lifetime to do things. And also, I look at it as Iyengar was an amazing master. He gave us restorative yoga. He gave us the use of props. I'm the kind of person who likes to study everything I can.
Yeah. And make
Why
use of it.
limit myself? And I don't believe that there's one way to do things. I think that's one of the problems of the world today, is a sense of fundamentalism.
Yeah.
A sense that my way is the only way. You're wrong and I'm right. I'm better, you're not good. But this is not the yoga path.
No.
This is not the yogic way. So I think that sometimes when we don't know, we put up walls.
Yeah.
But those walls are not helpful for our growth and our connection with the entire universe and planet. And if we can see that things can be different, but things can be beautiful, why not?
Why not do it?
Why not do it?
And so some of the obstacles people put in the way, shall we say, is that by introducing openers or the use of props, that it might disrupt the flow of the practice or the moving meditation. I know you've probably heard it a million times. So what is your rationale to support,
I think there's something very good about breath and movement and the gaze. It helps you concentrate. But I need to be able to concentrate when I'm on my mat, and I need to be able to concentrate when I'm in my daily life. I can't separate those two. When I take a block, it's the nature of my mind. I can take my block mindfully and know that the prop is going to help me get more length in my spine, and so I'm within my flow because I'm present, because I have a good reason. Or I can reach forcefully for the floor, not get the block, breathe loudly, create tension in my body, and I don't consider that flow. So to me, flow is a state of mind. And concentration can happen when I'm on my mat. Concentration can happen when I go there and put my shoes on and walk to my room. Or I can just put my shoes on and go to my room and have no sense of flow. So flow to me is about concentration. It's about going inside, tuning in. It's not necessarily about where my gaze is.
Right.
Whether I look at my nose, I look between the eyebrows. That is not a magical formula to reach enlightenment.
No.
But if I understand the concept of concentrating my eyes at a place, but not necessarily the nose. Maybe it's someplace else because my neck doesn't like the nose, or my neck doesn't like the... If I understand the concept, because it's the yogic total concept that's important, not the silly little detail of, is it here? I've had people fight, whether it's here or here. You cannot be my student because you look at the tip of your nose. I mean, come on, let's get a life.
And so those sort of things sort of thread their way through the whole practice. And do you see that Ashtanga in the past, maybe things are slightly changing, it's never been necessarily associated with very good alignment in the postures, whereas Iyengar, that's very much a focus of it. So the merging of the two, obviously there's a lot of benefits to be had from that. And are there certain areas that you think really stand out in the practice which has been neglected?
You mean in the Ashtanga practice?
Yes. As in its traditional form, shall we say?
Well, I think that one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that a lot of students that go and study Ashtanga and become teachers, they're generally somewhat more capable physically.
Right.
And they sometimes tend to be a little bit younger. And that not everyone that comes to yoga is 25 years old.
Right.
Some people that come to yoga are in their 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
And that it's the point of the Ashtanga practice is to give you more peace of mind and to make you more aware of your breath so that you are more free and can have a better feeling in your body. But seeing it as you have to do this pose and then this pose neglects the total feeling of well-being.
Yeah.
So if you're in your 40s and your 50s, and you can't do lotus, why should you not practice Ashtanga? Why should you not make the practice appropriate for you?
Yeah.
Why do we need to put the pressure on an older student or a less capable student to do things that potentially are not so good for them? I mean, let's face it. We take a look at first series.
Yes.
It is not a beginning yoga practice.
No, I've always thought that it's like, it's pretty damn tough, isn't it?
It's pretty damn tough. I mean, Marichyasana D is not a beginning asana practice.
No.
And I personally like to teach lots of people. I like to teach people that are older and stiff and injured, and I like to have the totality of humanity in my class. Why limit? And so I think one of the mistakes that is happening in the Ashtanga world is a lot of teachers are seeing it as a dogma.
Yeah.
This is the practice. You know, you do this and then you do this, and I don't see it that way. I see it as a total yoga practice, and then a human being that's in front of me with their conditioning and their stuff and their things. I mean, how many people beat themselves up because they can't rap in Marichyasana D?
Yeah.
You're not teaching yoga.
And then they might end up doing something unhealthy just to get the bind.
Yeah, but that's even more than unhealthy. It's what happens to their mind. They feel bad.
Yeah.
And they think they're less of a yogi because they can't rap.
Yeah.
Then you've missed the entire concept of yoga. The entire total concept of yoga. You have to see Ashtanga as a much, much bigger thing.
So more inclusive, more adaptability.
Yes. Love. More love. I mean, what are we doing? We're making, sergeants doing the thing. That's not yoga.
Yeah.
Yoga is being flexible, pliable, block, okay, hand, okay, I tried it this, okay. That's yoga. Not do it if you don't do it. I mean, I've had teachers who won't talk to me because I use blocks.
Right.
Friends, they won't talk to me anymore. Wow.
Yeah. Because even proportion-wise, we're so different as well.
Yeah.
So length of arms, length of legs.
Yeah. And I mean, I've had, 25, 30-year-olds that just should never do Padmasana.
Yeah.
It's just not good for them. The body's not meant for it.
Yeah.
But they could do so many other things well. It's the pressure. There's no need for pressure.
So what would you do? Would you keep to the framework of the sequencing of the asanas, but modify them as you go, or introduce new asanas? How would you...
That's a very good question. Well, it all depends on the student.
Right.
Okay, so for example, with some students, I would just take some things out.
Yeah.
Some things out, make it a little easier.
Yeah.
But some students, they need so much work on basics.
Yeah.
They come so, their body is in such, that needs to get strong, needs to get healthy.
Yeah.
Maybe they just do modified sun salutations and standing poses and do the standing poses more, more of them.
Repeat them.
Repeat them. And then do something to end the practice, maybe something more restorative.
Yeah.
For someone who's maybe been ill or has sat in a computer for a long time, that's a very strong practice, particularly if you know how to work the muscles and how to train them to work well. And then you introduce breath and introduce gaze, so you introduce the real concepts of Ashtanga, the real juice of the practice, not the cosmetics of it, not the outfit that you wear, but the real essence of the person. And then with some people, maybe they have a weak upper back.
Yeah.
And so maybe we need to interject some things to go, because yoga is supposed to be therapeutic.
Yes.
It's a therapeutic practice. So if I have a student and they have some issues in their upper back or issues in their shoulders, I'll introduce either before or after certain asanas that will target those areas.
Yeah.
So if it's the upper back, maybe we'll introduce a whole set of how to do cobras, and we can use some of Iyengar's work with blocks and things that are helpful. Or maybe they have a shoulder injury and they need to work. What am I going to do? Put them in chaturanga and up dog if they have a shoulder injury? I need to strengthen their arms. I need to change the way the muscles work because it is going to affect their neck. So maybe they'll do that for a while until that's taken care of. And then we go more into the practice. It's like that. It's a playground.
Take the time to actually get ready for it almost.
Teach this. human in front of you. It's
Yes.
like a child. You can't send every kid to the same class. Not every child is going to exceed in math. Shove it down their throat? No. Give them a little math, but then give them the classes that works for them. You know, as parents, we cultivate the children. We want them to blossom into what's good for them. Sure, we want them to test things that are not because it opens them. But why push a child to become a doctor if they want to be an artist?
Yeah.
Let them be the artist.
And do you feel among the sexes there's any difference in the way that, as a group, that you need to approach the practice? Because men will generally be stronger from the word go, won't they?
Yes.
So there's certain asanas that are very strength-based, aren't they?
Yeah, I think that, you know, for women it's really important not to be so tough with them on the pickup jump backs.
Yeah.
And I think with, you know, I think I think that Ashtanga tends to be a little bit of a masculine practice. I think it's very good for women to learn to do restoratives, particularly when they are, you know, close to their period or not feeling well.
Yeah.
And not to try to compete with the boys, because it's really not useful. And I think it's nice to be feminine. So it's nice to know how to do those things that yoga so beautifully has ingrained in it.
Yeah.
And also for the guys to, you know, to sometimes learn
To be a bit softer.
to be a bit softer, you know, and to explore that aspect of themselves. Sometimes, you know, like if a student of mine is tired, I'll ask them to do a restorative practice, because I think students that study Ashtanga should know what restorative yoga is about.
Yeah.
They should know it. It's so magical. It's such a bridge to pranayama and then a bridge to meditation.
And you do a lot of meditation yourself as well, I understand. Is it Vipassana?
Vipassana. I started studying Vipassana maybe 8 years ago. There's different kinds of Vipassana, so I study a more Theravada tradition, so not so much the Goenka kind.
So how, for those that are not sure, including me, what is the difference between the two approaches?
Goenka has a method. Similar to Ashtanga,
Right.
everyone does the method.
Right.
In the Theravada tradition, there are methods,
Yeah.
and they choose them for the student. So maybe the concentration is at the breath at the belly, maybe the concentration is a bit different depending on the student, because every mind is different.
Right.
Eventually, though, in the Theravada tradition, you let go of the technique and you do what is called open meditation, where you allow yourself to be with what is happening in the moment.
Right.
And then if you get lost, you go back to your anchor, to that chosen technique that was given to you, or
Right.
that suits you, or that makes you comfortable. And you practice this way. The Goenka is much more of a regimented
Formalized,
format.
maybe.
And for me, I like the other style works for me, because I don't want to groove.
That seemed to be the way you go with the physical practice as well, that it seems to would also fit in with the same mindset or mindfulness.
Yes. And, you know, but I think, like, for example, if I do have a student that's, you know, very capable mind-wise, meaning they're not like this,
Yeah.
they understand that a restorative practice is good. They understand when a prop is helpful. When they have that kind of mind and their physical body knows what to do, then I will teach them the Ashtanga. I will teach
Right.
it to them.
Right.
Each breath, and I
Yeah.
know all the ways Patabi wanted it. I
Yeah.
will. Why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
But it's to have that ability to adapt to the student.
And for that student not to grab it.
Yes.
For that student to go, oh, okay, today I don't feel well. I don't feel well. I will get blankets I will put my body in a place where I can restore. And tomorrow is another day.
Yeah.
I can do my practice.
So love yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Listen. Because I think so many times people get on their mats and they use the practice to beat themselves up. They use the practice to ingrain the ways in which they are hard on themselves or issues. They bring it to their mat and they ingrain it deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper.
Right.
So they're hard on themselves. Their mind always hard. I'm not doing well enough, or whatever their mind. They're just beating themselves on the mat and making those grooves tougher and stronger and.
Yeah, rather than using it as a supporting practice and yeah. And for yourself, is there, there's so much we can gain from the Iyengar approach to where to place body parts and alignment of the pelvis and that type of thing. And the Marichasanas are always a sort of one where all that sort of comes to a head, isn't it? Because there's so much going on with the body. That and maybe some of the back bends. So what are the sort of principles that people could sort of start after this interview looking at their own practice and saying, okay, I wonder whether I'm in that place or not, or whether I've disregarded some of the stuff that should be going on in my body. What would you say for them if they want to look at, say, Marichasana A or B, where things should be relative to one another?
Well, in Marichasana B, I mean, the student does need to understand how to do the lotus correctly in a way that doesn't damage the knee.
Yeah.
So that's would take a little while. So the student really needs to understand, and the student actually needs to understand how to do the standing poses correctly.
Right.
I think so often in Ashtanga, the teachers just go through this 5 breaths, and there's not enough explanation of what does the hip do, what does the leg do, what does the groin do, where does the weight in my leg, and so it has to start almost earlier.
Yeah.
I think this is the brilliance of Iyengar. You see, I think what happened, and I love both Iyengar and Patabi, and I don't hold, I look at it as I have 2 brilliant instructors.
Yeah.
And one instructor chose this form. They just happen to be very good at color. Say I have 2 art teachers.
Yeah.
This art teacher is super good with color. They're just so good with color. But this art teacher is very good with form.
Yeah.
I don't choose this teacher over this. I choose this teacher for the color.
Yeah.
And I choose this teacher for the form. And I don't have to have this teacher know what that teacher, and I don't have to do that. And I don't have to play them up against each other. It's not necessary. So in this way of thinking, Iyengar, I think, started teaching Westerners a lot sooner than Patabi Joyce did.
Right.
And I also think that the students that went to Patabi Joyce were younger. They traveled to India in the 70s. You had to be a little out there, right? You already were eating coconuts. You were sitting on the floor. You were a different character. But Iyengar went to the West.
Right.
And he's like, what do I do with this? The people were very different.
Yeah.
And it's not even just the difference in the body. It's also difference in the mind. The Indian mind is very different from the Western mind. In many ways, they're more confident about themselves. They have, in many ways, more connections with their families. In the West, a lot of us are broken. We're broken. We're really hard on ourselves. I mean, the Dalai Lama went to a group of teachers, meditation teachers in the West, and the meditation teachers tried to explain to the Dalai Lama that many people in the West feel unworthy and hate themselves. And it took them a half hour until he understood that.
Right.
Because it's not in their culture.
Yeah.
It's not in their, and he started weeping. He said, this is wrong thinking. But in the West, we're dealing with that. So I think Iyengar he's a different character. It's not that one's better than the other. He's a different character. So he went to the West and he saw, whoa, what is this? And he's also kind of a technician. He's a magician. He was a magician.
Yeah.
And he wanted to figure out how to do things. He was mechanical. Do it this way, do it that way. And that was his orientation. So we learned from him that, and we respect that. So in Marchasana, one has to learn, how do the standing poses teach me how to do the half lotus?
Right.
I need to learn them in the standing poses, not in sitting down.
Weights are there already.
Where it could potentially hurt my knee. How do I open my hips properly so that the lotus unfolds well?
Yeah.
And in the wrapping, you know, that I don't see the wrap as the end result.
It's just a flourish on the end.
Yes, you do it, you don't. Doesn't matter. Your heart, is not affected by whether you wrap or not. You're not a better person. You're not more enlightened. None of that.
Yeah.
So you have to understand, well, where is my shoulder in relationship to my leg? And am I uncomfortable? Am I straining? Do I understand what I'm doing? Have I learned enough to put this puzzle together? So
Lots going on.
lots going on.
And I've had teachers say to me before, because I also add bits and pieces in and things like that in my practice, and I've had teachers say, you know, if you change the sequence, then you're basically saying that you know more than Pattabhi Jois, or, you know, this is the sequence he's decided upon, you know, so if you add bits in, you're changing the sequence. So,
Wow. God, I have to be careful with how to answer that. You know, it's kind of like when a student comes up to you and has a shoulder injury,
Yeah.
or they have pain in their low back, and you just tell them, keep doing the practice, keep doing the breathing.
yeah, that happens too, doesn't it?
That's not going to work. That's because the teacher doesn't know.
Yeah.
I find that mentality very limited. No teacher knows everything. I just don't buy that. Teachers have their limitations. And that to me sounds like a dogma and the fundamentalism and the troubles we're having in the world. This is my way, do it my way, or you're no good. I don't buy that. I just don't buy that. I think you have to experiment more. I think almost any sequence, a somewhat intelligent sequence, if you do it every day, will have a very positive effect.
Yeah.
You know, we can make 20 different sequences, intelligent ones, practice them for 7 years, 10 years, they'll be really nice. They'll be good for you.
Yeah.
This is just one way. One way. It's a good way, don't get me wrong. It's a really good one, but it has limitations. And no, I don't think that means you know more than Pattabhi Jois. I think that Pattabhi Jois had his interests. Pattabhi Jois was not as curious as Iyengar was about certain bodies and certain conditions. He just wasn't. It wasn't his curiosity.
Yeah.
I don't blame him for that. But why not see what else is possible? Yeah.
It allows for a lot more adaptation to the individual, doesn't it? If you're willing to change bits in the sequence and add bits in and more tailor it.
As long as it's for the benefit of the student.
Yes.
Not the benefit of my ego.
Right.
As a teacher.
As a teacher.
I am the one who knows.
Yeah.
No. It's because it's for the benefit of your knee, your hip, your ability to be nicer to yourself, sweeter to yourself. It's for the benefit of the person that you are having the privilege to teach yoga to at that moment.
And how do you approach the fact that a lot of people get stuck, and can imagine what you're going to say as well, get stuck in the primary series, particularly if they come to it later in life, which is predominantly forward folding and some hip opening. And then if you don't enter into the second, where you've got more front body opening, then you're creating some imbalance, particularly over a long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you sort of integrate those sorts of things into your more holistic approach, shall we say?
I'll give you an example. Patabi Joyce used to tell us that unless we were done with third series, we could not learn pranayama.
Right.
But yet, one day, he let a student who was very, very weak, but a long-time student who barely did much more than first, come to the pranayama class. He broke the rule. It's because the gentleman was in his late 50s, 60s, was never going to do third series, but had the mind, he was ready.
He was ready.
I've seen Patabi Joyce put someone on the wall for headstand. I've seen Patabi Joyce give someone a sock to hold for half lotus.
Right.
So I think it's very important to realize that first series is much forward bends and hips. How in the world are we going to take from that sequence someone into Urdhva Dhanurasana? If they're older and not capable, they need some back bends. They need the counter. Cobra, Shalabhasana is much easier than Urdhva Dhanurasana. Much easier. So good for the upper back. Prerequisite for Urdhva Dhanurasana. Makes no sense. No sense why students don't learn Cobra, Shalabhasana, even Dhanurasana. It's much easier than, so much is going on in Urdhva Dhanurasana. You have to have your shoulders, upper back, so much going on. So I don't see the point. Yeah, they should get some back bends. Why hold their age against them? Why hold it against them?
But even regardless of age, some people, they're just like super stiff in the shoulders. Might be work, might just be the design of their joints.
So for example, if I have a student that's got issues in their upper back and they're older, they'll do a form of sun salutations. They'll do some of the standing poses, often repeated. And then I'll take him to the wall and we'll do cobras and mini shalabhasanas, and I have some other ways of working some of those poses. It's great practice. It's more balanced. Why push them through those poor forward bends? They're like this, and everything hurts, and it looks terrible, and their back doesn't feel good. At some point, it has to feel good. It has to be beneficial. It's not about this regimented, linear progression of. It's just a recipe. Yes, it's a great recipe, but sometimes you just don't have vanilla. Or you don't have cumin. You don't cook that day.
Add a bit of your own flavor.
As long as it's in benefit, in true benefit of the student.
What about those students that are practicing on their own? Because all around the world there's loads of people that haven't got access to a teacher. And then you have that tendency sort of to do what you like. Do you know what I mean? Because you're good at it.
Right.
So how do they need to be aware with their approach to dabbling with the sequence, shall we say?
Well, this is the real strength of Ashtanga. This is the real strength of Ashtanga. I'd say, if anything, this is one of the areas where Ashtanga practitioners excel over Iyengar students, often, not always, because they have to do things that they're not so good at. I think there is a difference between avoiding and something you shouldn't do. I think that's a very distinct difference. It's not like I want to avoid Marichyasana D.
No.
I want you to learn Marichyasana D, but I also know when that's ridiculous.
Enough's enough.
Yes, so one has to distinguish that. And then, then I think it's good to have the Ashtanga system, because you do need to try to practice things that are not in your comfort zone. I think that's the brilliance of Ashtanga. That's what's so good about it. So yes, so you for those students, maybe they need to be in a situation where they learn where, no, I'm avoiding. No, this is just not appropriate for my body, my age, my situation. I think we really need to understand the distinction between those two areas.
Yeah.
And then I think I tell Ashtanga students all the time, you know, if you have teachers that don't want to teach alignment, go to the other camp.
Yeah.
It's a good camp. We're all good people. Go study there. What's wrong with Iyengar teachers? What's wrong with Ashtanga teachers? We're all in this together to raise humanity a bit, you know? So go study the Iyengar system. Be a respectful student. Don't go in there doing your Ujjayi breath. Don't go in there doing your, you know, I know better than you. Go in respectful, learn, and take it into your practice.
Yeah.
And make the practice work for you then.
And what are some of the key, because quite often we talk about alignment, but don't nail it down. Obviously there's lots of aspects to it, but what are some of the keys that people can be thinking about what they're doing in the practice as far as alignment-based, thoughtful practice goes?
You know, I think that one's difficult to answer you because it's, you know, the Iyengar system has a real system. He really was extremely systematical. It's like he even created a system of how to teach a pose.
Right.
He was scientifically kind of brilliant. So you know, there's an approach to it. You have to kind of study the basic understandings of Tadasana.
Yeah.
How does the thigh muscles work? How does the sacrum work? How do I release my lumbar? How does the chest work? How do I really open my chest and not crunch my lumbar? What did the shoulders do? What did the arm? He really diagnostically did that. So it takes a little bit of time, a little patience to learn it, but then it just fits super into the Ashtanga.
Then you can apply it.
You apply it and it's endless. And it's like it's just like this incredible, you know, story that unravels, and all these things you find in there, rather than get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, rather than get more rigid, you open up into a whole world of possibilities within the gaze, within the breath, within the drishti.
And so a lot of the time when we're in the practice, we can also approach it from a way that we're sort of flopping in and out and not bringing awareness to engagement and building strength as well as flexibility or range of motion around the joints. And how can we bring more awareness, say, in the standing postures? Is a great time to practice on strengthening the body, and so what sort of mindset do we need to bring to those postures?
We need to have a whole lesson.
We need to have a whole lesson.
Yeah. Well, it depends. You know, you have different kinds of standing poses. You have
Yeah.
standing poses where the legs are straight,
Yeah.
so where the legs need to learn to engage. They need to learn to firm. You have standing poses where the legs are rotated in a certain way, so the rotation has to come from the hip and not the knee, so the student needs to learn the difference.
Yeah.
And then we have standing poses where the legs are bent, where it's very much about strengthening the quads in a different kind of a way. So we have to learn the differences and how the weight is distributed a little bit differently in these poses to bring the awareness into the proper muscles so that we can get the most benefit. So this is a whole lesson. A few lessons worth.
In 5 minutes. You did
And then
really well.
Trikonasana is a lifetime.
Right.
If you're not fascinated with Trikonasana,
Yeah.
if you're not extremely fascinated with Trikonasana, you have not begun to explore the possibilities.
Because on the face it looks a very simplistic posture, doesn't it? But there's lots going on.
I think a intelligent Trikonasana is the sign of an advanced student, not whether you hold your ankles in Urdhva Dhanurasana.
Yeah.
You could just have a place in your back that bends in half. Just go to the Circus Olay. There's lots of those guys in there. But to do Trikonasana well, where the legs are working, the pelvis is in its proper position, the chest is properly open, the spine is properly lengthened, the mind is quiet, the breath is smooth, the gaze is relaxed. You can hold the pose for 25 breaths and come out feeling completely released. that's an advanced student.
Yeah. I mean, Trikonasana is one of the ones that the more traditional teachers, shall we say, is like, you know, you must hold your big toe in Trikonasana. And I can see you shaking your head, and it's like, you know, I'm also of that camp that is just like, why are you going to do that? And you pull yourself into this terrible position.
It's one of the worst. You know, so many students hold their big toes and their hips are not ready, and they torque their hip. That you can get a lot of injuries in the hip from that. And you're not doing anything to open your hips. Nothing. You're just kind of wasting your time.
Yeah. And worse, maybe damaging yourself.
And possibly, if you're aggressive.
Yeah.
If you're aggressive. So one of the worst combinations, and it happens to be a combination that we get in Ashtanga, is we get A types. Worse than that, we get triple A types.
Right. That's a type of battery too, isn't it?
Huh?
Type of battery too.
Yeah, it's a kind of a person who's extremely enthusiastic, wants a lot. They're wonderful people, but they can overdo things, and they can let their will overpower really what's happening. And so you put that combination with somebody that shouldn't be doing something, and they're forcing, and you have a nice recipe for disaster.
Yeah. Are there any other postures that spring to mind? So Trikonasana is one.
Trikonasana is one. All the half lotuses. So, you know, binding and folding forward so early in the sequence is very unwise for many students. A lot of injuries can occur there. Marchasana D. Kurmasana, very difficult asana. And then I think a lot of dangerous in the back bends.
Yeah.
The insistence on holding the ankles is insanity reincarnated. I mean, people just push themselves. They just push like there's some enlightenment in holding the ankles.
Yeah.
The Dalai Lama can't hold his ankles.
Yeah.
But he's about the most spiritual creature I've ever met.
And what about the whole clenching of the bum thing in Dhanurasana?
You're really squeezing, aren't
I'm
you?
sorry, I'm getting the juice out one way or another.
It's not you really need to learn to work the legs.
Yeah.
If the buttock crunches and the legs rotate out in back bends, it is not good for the low back. So the legs need to learn to turn properly so the sacrum can remain spacious and not crunched, so that the back bend is not concentrated at the lower back, but learns to lengthen out of the low back.
Yeah.
That's an art.
And another whole lesson.
That's a whole few lessons.
A whole few lessons.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Maty, for talking to me. I mean, we could, you know, delve deeper and deeper, I'm sure. But it's great, and I really like that more mindful approach, more embracing approach. It's great.
It's more fun to teach that way.
Yeah, I'm sure. Thanks very much for your time. Thank you. Cool.
Yay! Oh my God! Wow!
And the audience. We should have had some canned clapping every now and again.